Hi, welcome to my channel, That Mishlei Guy. So most of the time we open our Bibles to the book of Proverbs and we examine one particular verse and break it down word by word from the original Hebrew and do long form teaching. But we're currently in the middle of a series about just the concept of wisdom itself. There are these 11 terms that pop up again and again throughout the Proverbs. They appear, over 100 times, and they make references to these different elements that compose what we're calling the constellation of wisdom. If you want a real quick recap, we did a video series that established that from the Hebrew perspective, there's not the same understanding of a human mind that we operate under, and essentially that the heart of the will is in something known as the lev, the heart, the inner person. And so when you read your Old Testament, it will constantly be talking about the heart this, the heart that. The heart is effectively, this is where decisions are made. And it uses knowledge as its primary counselor to make these informed decisions. And so we're looking at the things that actually feed into this wisdom in each of the responsibilities. So these first videos that we established is that there are 3 traits that are developed internally. And then there's a balancing out of 3 traits that come externally. And once we do this, we build this big, strong foundational base. And then that can get us to where we're going to kind of pivot now in this video series. And we're going to look at these traits that the wise person will have that will use these 6 inputs. And that as these things are developed, they're going to form a feedback loop, and they're actually going to strengthen as they press into these inputs and increase the strength of its own foundation. They don't rest on these supports, they entrench them. And this is this ecosystem. So we are going to look at 4 terms today. They are referenced 31 total times. The first one is this term Arum, and it gets translated as shrewdness. Basically, I thought that I was going to be able to do all 4 of these terms in one video. I'm not. Arum is such a massive concept that basically we're going to have to do the entire video today only on this one term. It appears 11 times in the Proverbs as an adjective, and it's going to be the primary thing that the additional 3 traits are going to draw from. But without the Arum, you can't really develop these other ones. So the other 4 is tushiyyah, and this means resourcefulness. This appears 10 times as a noun. A person who's wise is going to make very good use of resources. The next term will be ormah, which is prudence, which actually comes from the Arum. That's what we're going to talk about today. But once the Arum is fully developed, then it can be applied as prudence. And that appears 4 times as the noun ormah in the Proverbs. And then the last one is what is known as navon, which is clarity. And this is going to appear 6 times as a noun. And this is basically the highest level of wisdom, is the ability to see everything clearly. But the interplay of all of these things, the 6 foundational elements, these 4 traits, plus the inherent trait of sekel, of just intelligence, this is wisdom in its full constellation. And like I said, wisdom is recursive. So we're going to go ahead and jump in to this idea of Arum. It's going to be what the entire video is about today. This adjective appears 11 times in the Proverbs. It's a dualistic term, and it has 2 different meanings, both of which are going to be absolutely fundamental in wisdom. And they come from a primitive root verb, as most of the words in Hebrew do. And that primitive root is a verb called Arum, and that means the ability to uncover, to see and read through something. And depending on the pronunciation and the context in which it's used is going to change its meaning. And the main area that we're going to focus on right off the bat is in Genesis 3. This is the fall of mankind. And this is where Adam and Eve have Arom, but they encounter this serpent who has Arum. And when you see it as Arom, they were Aromim, the 2 of them. It means naked. They were fully exposed. They were completely uncovered. But then the serpent himself, he had Arum, and this adjective usually gets translated as cunning or shrewd or crafty. Sometimes it can just get translated as wise. But the implication of these two things and the interplay between them is the idea of concealment and exposure. This is the innocence versus knowledge. The serpent knows something and they do not. He has a strategy. They do not. And what ends up happening is that nakedness is a vulnerability that when it's interacting with someone who has Arum, it becomes just tremendous vulnerability. You know, it's a weakness to have. And the moment that Adam and Eve realize that they've been had and that they now have this Arum, they begin strategizing themselves. And the first things they do is they cover themselves and begin evading, hiding and avoiding God. So they are now acting with Arum. Their Arum is gone. Their Arum is what they now operate with. And this is so foundational at the beginning of the story of humanity, because this dynamic, the moment that it changed, means that every single person going forward is going to require both. We're going to be in this constant quest to try to get back to a point where we can hold Arum, but in the meantime, we're navigating a world that's going to require that we have Arum. And the idea of this holy Arum is the man wants the transparency. He wants the relationship. So he doesn't cover himself at all. He does not make excuses for his behavior. He does not avoid God's presence. He doesn't lie to God. He's very accountable. And one of the first acts of trying to reclaim your Arum is the very idea of repentance itself. And as you're building this relationship with God, you don't fear the exposure, the transparency. You invite it. You ask, the Holy Spirit to examine you, and you're constantly trying to purge yourself of your own sin in your actions and the sinful desires that are in your heart, and you're having this constant open dialogue with God. And this is going to have you in a state of repenting, constantly changing and constantly seeking a moral evaluation so that you can develop more and more of this Arum. And it's closely linked to humility, and this is the whole thing that we're doing, right? We're seeking righteousness. We're trying to recover the Arum that Adam lost for us. But then we're also going to have to understand this idea of Arum, and this is something that gets translated as craftiness or shrewdness. It's usually, there's an implication that it's bad, or that, just somebody's sneaky. They're up to something when you see this word Arum. But the idea being is that without moral mastery, this is a bad thing for us to have. And in order for it to become a good thing, a useful thing, we're going to have to develop a moral core that understands how to use it properly. And so the good application of shrewdness is a person is going to have the ability to uncover the hidden motives of others. They're going to be able to anticipate how things are going to go. They're going to recognize what the other person is going to do. They're going to recognize what the response and reaction to their own actions are going to be. So that there's this interplay of comprehending consequences, and the person with Arum, therefore, becomes strategic. They think before they act. They're the opposite of impulsive. And this is where we think of shrewdness as this good character trait of this thing that is a positive thing, is mainly through communication and commerce. If you ever hear that somebody's a shrewd businessman, or man, they're really handled that situation very shrewdly. It's essentially, this is a person who's able to keep their temper. They're able to remain silent. They're good at negotiating deals. They have a poker face. They're hard to read. They don't give the game away. And they don't step on tripwires and landmines. So the idea of the good Arum is that this is a person who conceals their knowledge, and They only let things out as a need to know basis. And basically this, for Arum to be good, it's going to be strategic thinking that has been sanctified. It's got clean motives. Probably a good way to understand Arum in this sense as shrewdness is common sense or street smarts. We think of this idea that there's book smarts and street smarts. Well, the person with Arum they're going to have what's the street smarts. They're going to be hard to trick. And the whole idea in wisdom is that we have these two guys on the opposite end of the spectrum, the wise man and the fool. Well, the fool is the person who gets tricked very easily. They fall for everything. The person who's wise and evil, they find the fool and they take advantage of them. That's why we get that idea that someone is being fooled. But you're not going to get away with this with the person with Arum. And one of the ways that I think of like someone with like really good, well-developed Arum is you can see this with moms and their kids. They are extremely, extremely perceptive that whenever the kid is trying to hide something, they can get down to the bottom of it really quick. They can detect a lie. They're so sensitive to little small things that they're going to trip you up. They're going to know the right kind of questions to ask. And that's being very, very shrewd. And a person with good shrewdness is going to recognize that people do cover up their motives and that they're using misdirection. So they stay on guard. They're not naive about the way that the world works. And the idea is that for this to be morally tempered, you need to know that once you don't use it for yourself. The bad kind of Arum would be coming up with schemes. The good kind of Arum, what we're talking about here, is the ability to recognize when someone else is scheming and expose it. So again, we're back to this idea of this whole term centers around the relationship between something being concealed and something being exposed. So this good Arum, this kind of street smarts of this kind, is going to see the craftiness in someone else and uncover the hidden motives that they are trying to conceal. But kind of circling back to the person who has not developed this kind of shrewdness, the idea of the fool. Well, where does he get fooled the most often? Well, it's with money and it's with love. They get taken advantage of. They fall for liars, and you really, really see men and women abuse each other in romance of just leading people on or taking advantage of them. But with this modern era of, particularly with AI and these things, that they've become so incredibly sophisticated that you think of just crazy stuff like email scams and text messages and fake links and stuff that people give away, their medical information or their credit card information. Is a person with good Arum, you're going to need this to get through the modern world, because there's so many scams. So now we're going to go ahead and pivot to the idea of this bad shrewdness, the Arum, that the serpent has. And two things with the wise man is going to need to make sure that they themselves don't develop these as character traits, as the ability to deceive others and manipulate situations and basically become a bad guy, using your wisdom to take advantage of fools, because the temptation will definitely be there to do it. And then, like I said, the idea to uncover and recognize when someone is attempting to do that to you. So this constant battle is to eliminate bad Arum out of yourself while simultaneously developing this keen sensitivity to the bad Arum as others. So we're going to circle back to this pivotal interaction that the serpent have with Adam and Eve. He is described as clever, having more Arum than any other beast. When you actually read the book of Genesis, was originally written in Hebrew. This is where they use this word Arum. And the different translations will say that the serpent was cunning or clever or crafty or wise. But this is exactly what they're talking about, this idea of Arum. And the whole idea of, you say you give the devil his due, right? Is he's not incompetent. He's got us pegged. He's got everything down. So this serpent, he uses his Arum to read the situation correctly. He sees Adam and Eve. He knows that they're fools, and he knows exactly how to develop a strategy to take them down. On the flip side, Adam and Eve, they've never had to interact with someone who has bad Arum, so they're not on guard. They don't know what to defend. They don't realize they're under attack. So what the serpent does is he perceives correctly that the thing he's going to have to attack is the word of God itself, and that Adam and Eve, this is all they really have to go on, is what God has told them. So that immediately becomes his strategy. Is he doesn't attack it head on. The first thing he does is he sees that their major weak point is their own desire, and he tells them, "Hey, look at the fruit. It's good for you. Like don't worry about it. Like no, look at it. Doesn't it look nice?" As he knows that if he can make them desire it, then he's opened the door for what he actually wants to do, and immediately he begins reframing things. So he starts quizzing them. He's testing them. Well, did God not say? And next thing you know, he's mixing in some half truth. He's like, your eyes will be open, which that is true. Your eyes will be open, and doesn't tell them all the bad stuff that's going to come along with it. He leaves that part out, and he also reassures their safety. You will not die. And essentially, he's got them because they don't know what to be on guard for. And the person who has this bad type of shrewdness, make no mistake, they're very perceptive. They recognize all the pieces on the board. They have a strategy. They know what their goal is. They recognize the obstacles, and they are planning a path to navigate and maneuver around them. Never underestimate someone with this bad kind of shrewdness, this evil Arum. So they're going to develop this strategy, and they're going to implement it subtly and suggestively. And the main thing that someone who's got really bad Arum, or really well-developed evil Arum rather, is they let the fool make every one of the key decisions for themselves. All they do is simply guide them. They identify their weaknesses, and they use their weakness against them. And someone who does not have positive Arum, they will not catch on that this is what's happening. But the person who does, they'll see it from a mile away. They'll recognize very early on what this person is trying to do. And a righteous man will not use these tactics, but a righteous man will be aware that these tactics exist. And it's going to be a very difficult thing to sneak up on him this way. But if you want to keenly develop your ability to perceive the bad Arum of others, you have to eliminate the manipulativeness and scheming from your own behavior. This is the crazy thing of like why this is such an amazing term, is the only real answer to the Arum, the evil of the world, is transparency before God. So the more transparent your relationship is with God, one of the gifts that he gives you is deeper wisdom, deeper understanding, and you'll be able to see these things much more clearly. But you're not going to get that if you also have this Arum within yourself. You're not going to be a schemer and intimate with God. You'll have to choose to be one or the other. And one of the main reasons why I think that this term is so pivotal for a Christian to understand is because Jesus teaches about Arum a lot. And you'll see this. It's not, they don't use that term because, obviously the New Testament is written in Greek, but we're going to look at two such incidents. The first one is this famous passage in the Bible where Jesus is telling his disciples, that you need to be as shrewd as serpents and as innocent as doves. Well, again, the New Testament's written in Greek, so the word that is used in this incidence is phronimoi, and it's used pretty frequently throughout the New Testament, and its translation range is it's shrewd or shrewdness, and sometimes it gets translated as wise or prudent. We'll talk about it. The Hebrew term for prudent is ormah, which comes from Arum, but they make a differentiation, and both Greek and English, they only have a positive meaning for this term, this idea of prudence or shrewdness, but the original Hebrew, this meaning is dualistic. It only becomes positive when it's ormah. When it's just left at Arum, there's an ambiguity. It can go either way. But why does Jesus tell his disciples to be as wise as serpents? This seems kind of like a strange thing to say, but when you actually study how a snake works in nature, they're actually pretty weak. We are afraid of them because nobody wants to get bitten by one, and they use ambush. They sneak up on you. You see them at the last second, and it's too late. They get you. But in reality, in nature, the snake is very weak. They've got very limited eyesight. They don't have great hearing. They have to take the world in through their tongue, and they're very vulnerable to birds of prey, especially. So they always use cover. They're always even their scales, everything about them is camouflage. They blend in because out in the open, they're sitting ducks. They're dead meat. Something's just going to swing by and snatch them. And because of this, if you'll ever watch a snake, man, they sit still, hours and hours at a time, because they're not trying to do anything that's going to raise anyone's awareness of their presence. They themselves have this very heightened sense of danger and threat. So they don't do anything impulsive. The snake, you can sit there and he doesn't have a big brain, but you can tell this little thing is thinking. He's not going to do anything dumb, and he's going to assess every single thing available to him, mainly the cover, and he's going to try to blend in. And so when Jesus is telling his disciples, you need to be as wise as serpents, well, that's what he's talking about. He's saying, well, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves, therefore be as wise as serpents. As he's telling them, don't take unnecessary risks. Be aware of everything around you. Pay attention to every single thing before you act. And above all, just blend in. If you go out there and you stand out, you're going to make yourself a highly visible target. So use the same strategies and techniques that serpent does to protect himself. Is don't take these unnecessary risks. And when he's saying, as you do this, you need to remain as innocent as a dove. You're not looking for fights. You're not going out there trying to challenge people and mix it up. But you have to preserve your own innocence. Is you need to know how this world works. And in doing so, don't let it take away your innocence. You observe the ways of the world without adopting them. And we see this. The reason why this warning is out there is because so many Christians, they have this great heart, but they're very vulnerable because they have a naivety to them, and the world just eats them up. And Jesus doesn't want his disciples out there like that. He wants them to actually develop this Arum, and at the same time to preserve their Arom. So we're seeing this dualistic thing happen where the Christian must be wise to the ways of the world as well. Another example of Jesus kind of teaching about this idea of Arum is the parable of the Shrewd Manager. And on its surface, it kind of confuses people if you're not familiar with the passage itself. It's this guy. It's discovered that he's a dishonest manager. He's kind of taking advantage of people, and his boss finds out about it, and he immediately begins changing everybody's what they owe on the books. And he's thinking of, well, later on, these people will applaud me and they'll treat me better. And Jesus is holding him up as this positive example. And your first reading of this is like, this is kind of confusing, because it's like, is Jesus praising this guy for committing fraud? Like, I mean, it seems like this guy's, what he's doing is illegal. And what Jesus is actually doing is he's teaching a lesson on forgiveness, which, I mean, I don't want to turn this into that lesson, but he's saying, like, look, this guy has practical wisdom. He's able to foresee consequences. He's perceptive and recognizes this danger. Jesus has been speaking and teaching this whole time about hell and damnation, and that this guy basically, he sees that trouble's on the horizon, and he's going to do whatever it takes to get himself out from underneath it. And so this guy, like the serpent, he's recognizing danger, and he's using strategic thinking to preserve himself. So in that sense, he's showing this good shrewdness, this good Arum. He develops this plan of self-preservation. He starts changing, what the people owe on the books. He's thinking in a strategic manner. And the big lesson with that parable is that, this shrewd manager, he understands the power of forgiveness in a way that the observant rule followers do not. So they've got the obedience down, they've got the morality down, but they're not particularly forgiving. But this guy, because he's so worldly, he understands, he's got a better grasp of how relationships work and how people work. We would call this emotional intelligence. And because of this, he understands the power of forgiveness. And that's the other thing that Jesus is trying to teach in this lesson. And, he even remarks that the children of light can learn from this guy, that we can teach him the morality, but the big thing is that he's got this forgiveness down right. And you guys need to learn from him that he's preserving himself and he's forgiving. And he's doing this because he has this well-developed sense of Arum. But this whole concept of, in Greek it's called phrenomoi, and in Hebrew it's Arum, but it basically means the same thing. Jesus wants disciples who are smart enough to navigate the wickedness of society while remaining moral themselves, and developing both of these things. This idea of Arom and Arum is the key trait that the wise man will have. And many times we see that, particularly in parenting, we don't prepare our kids for the real world. The natural parental instinct is, you want to preserve their innocence. You want to preserve their naivety. You don't want to talk about uncomfortable subjects with them. And then you send them out to college, and next thing you know, they start learning the world's ways on their own. And that's the very essence of sending out the sheep among the wolves, is if you don't give them the Arum, if you don't really focus on developing this trait within yourself and with those you care for, you guarantee that they're the sheep among wolves. And then when they start learning the ways of the world, it ensures that they too become a serpent with Arum. And to kind of wrap up the lesson on Arum, is it's this trait that we must have, right? But it's got this inherent danger, because it's morally neutral. It can go either way. I mean, this is the loaded gun sitting on the table. What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to point it? Are you going to become proficient using it? Are you going to know what situations to use it in and what situations not? The gun itself, it's just a gun, but depending on whose hands it is in determines whether it's dangerous. And wisdom requires this moral tempering, because if you don't tamp it down with morality, then this Arum will become craftiness and cunning. And when we go back and we look at this exchange between the serpent and Adam and Eve, he was correct. Your eyes are opened. You actually do have the ability to know the difference between good and evil. But the main thing that the serpent left out is that you don't have the holiness to be able to wield it with righteousness. And this is where people who are like secular humanists and other people that think that somehow we can get it right, that we can develop moral codes that are, absent and free of God. We don't have the holiness. So every single time, this whole Arum, it eventually becomes a form of manipulation, and we use it as leverage on other people. And it's not a good thing. You have to develop your heart and your morality as you develop wisdom. And you're going to be morally tested while you gain wisdom. As you become wise to the ways of the world, you're going to see there's angles to really use it to your own personal advantage. And righteousness is knowing not to do that. So other thing too is never become impressed with your own Arum. If you start to develop this wisdom and you got these street smarts and you can see other people's angles and you don't get fooled. Well, that, like I say, everyone gets got. Never, ever, ever think that you're so wise that someone else can't come along and sneak you, because there's really evil people and they have really, really, really developed great Arum. They're really good at perceiving where the weakness is and hammering it. So yeah, we really need this Arum because of the rise of AI. These things are getting so sophisticated now. It's so easy to get fooled, and it's only going to get better. And Jesus and all the prophets, they speak of this idea that there's like a coming persecution. Well, if you don't know how to navigate society, if you don't know how to have a poker face, you don't know how to blend in, you're going to get snatched. And so we have this whole idea that Arum is this interplay of exposure and covering, of transparency and subterfuge. The Proverbs, whenever they speak of this, it's used the 11 times. It's in the idea that these are the positive development of Arum. So when we're looking at Arum as the idea of transparency, this is what you are with God. You're honest with him in all your ways. You pursue righteousness and humility, so that you're not always having to hide yourself and avoid him. And part of that of the transparency is to recognize your own capacity for corruption and to always, always, always be looking for ways to purge yourself of it. Now with the world, this is where you're going to have to use the other type of Arum. Like I said, you need to develop a poker face. Do not show your cards, conceal what you know. Size up every situation before you act, and above all, develop a threat matrix. Be like that snake sitting on the rock underneath the tree limb that, he needs to look very closely before he decides to move. He doesn't know what's around the corner. And same thing is you need to pay attention to your surroundings and recognize the hidden motives of others and just avoid the danger. So wisdom is going to do both of these things. It's going to have this transparency with God, but this incredible cunning in dealing with the world and maintaining their morality. And this is how you remain as innocent as doves. The whole idea of guile is this double-mindedness. This is the ability to use your Arum for abuse. So always remain as wise as the serpent and innocent as the dove. So I thank you for listening. If you like this channel, please let other people know about it. We're trying to grow it. We're trying to get these things out. Once we conclude this little series on wisdom, I'll get back to doing with what the channel's actually about, which is translating the Proverbs themselves. But we could not get to these last 3 applied traits of wisdom if we didn't do an exhaustive and thorough explanation of Arum, because it's kind of be a building block for these last 3. So stay tuned. We've got probably one more where we'll do those traits, and then maybe one more after that to just recap and close out the entire series. And we'll get back to the Proverbs themselves, the Yeshua. So I thank you all for watching. Shalom.